Hi, I'm Margo. Welcome back to my sewing room. It's time to start on month number 5 of our Block of the Month project. This time we will be making the 9 corner blocks for all of the sashing units. Again, I'm using different colors, but this is what the completed blocks look like. I'd like to tell you the way I did mine, which is different from the instructions because I'm still using paper piecing. I tested my pattern first to make sure it measures exactly 1 inch square. I used a piece of freezer paper to trace off 1/2 of this center unit. This piece starts with a spiky part and ends with a background part, so we've got 4 of each of the shapes that we need to assemble for the paper piecing. I was able to take it to my computer and make 4 copies per page and printed off enough pages to finish my project. I cut the pieces apart so that I could do paper piecing, and I used the same technique that I used the last time. The printed side is the back side of the piece, and I just paper pieced, starting with a spike and ending with a background. Let me back that up. I started with a background and ended with a spike, and because I'm working in the same direction on every piece, all of my seam lines are going in the same direction, and I found that very helpful. After the pieces are stitched on, I trimmed around the outside edge. I realized when I finished that I really probably should have left this outside edge a little longer, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Before I removed the paper, I realized I had to make a mark for these 2 corners here because I don't have a seam line to guide my matching points. So those 2 points have got to be marked on my fabric. I did that just by using a stab pen through those 2 marks and then translating with another straight pen through to my fabric. Can you see that? So I just use pens. You can use the hole punch and make a mark and do it with a pencil, however you want to do it. But they've got to be marked so that we've got it marked on both ends. And from there, I will use those pen marks to align my 2 half units. Now this is a real funky looking thing because it doesn't lay flat yet. But I stitched just my 1/4 inch seam line, and I could go from one inside to the other. I don't need to stop at the beginning and the end. It just goes all the way across. And I can do that with 1 straight seam if you lay it down right. After the pins are removed, this gets pressed in the same direction. Because I was careful when I was doing my paper piecing, all of my seams are pressed in the same direction, and these 2 will just follow in line with the same direction for that. So it's all pieced, and I have a perfect circle. I made my center units just like I did my little round circles for the other months. It's also got the filling and the stable stuff, and I will take my Elmer's glue, run a line of glue around the edge, and I will place that right in the center. And I'm careful that the edges of that come so I don't cut off my points right around there. You can tug it a little bit if it needs some adjustment. And I'll heat set that from both sides. Now I'll take this to the sewing machine and I will stitch that circle in place. After it's stitched in place, I need to prepare the background fabric. I made a manila template using the pattern that is in our instructions and cut out the circle. I used an X-Acto knife to cut out the circle from the inside. My template is 6 inches square, which is the size they told us to cut the background fabric, and then the circle is right in the middle. I used registration lines to find the middle. I used a compass, found the center from my marks, and drew my circle and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife. I've also used at some sometimes I've used a wallpaper knife, just anything really sharp that you can get a good crisp line on there. After I've got my template made, I cut my background pieces to 6 inches square, and I could lay that template on that and draw a circle around the inside, and then I trim away, I left about a 1/2 inch there, and then I took little scissors and clipped about every 1/2 inch right up to that line. I didn't clip through it, but right up to that line. After it's clipped, it looks like this, and I'm going to do a reverse applique technique. This is one time where I will use a liquid starch with a brush, and I'll just put the starch, because my background fabric is already heavily starched, but I want more starch along this line that is going to be folded back around my template. So I do it like that. Then I will take my template and line it up with the circle that I have drawn on there. And I like to take pins and stab these corners so that my pattern doesn't shift. And very carefully fold back those little notches and heat set that with an iron until everything is pressed in place. As I come to a pin and it's in my way, I'll move it and work my way around the circle. After I've pressed the whole circle, it'll look like this, and I can remove my template and it looks like this. From here, I'm just going to draw a bead of glue close to the folded edge around the entire perimeter. I'll take my center, line it up with the outside points, and you want to be sure that the top edge, I'm using this motif and I want this to point to the top, so line up at least one of your points so that you've got north and south and east and west lined up, and if you need to, tug it out a little bit so that your points aren't cut off. And if it warps a little bit, you can usually press that out. So I heat set it to dry the glue. And this is where you can see why I probably should have left a little extra around the outside edge. You can see where I trimmed the background fabric, but there's not as much fabric on the star part. It works fine like this, but it was just something I realized after the fact. So now it's time to stitch that seam. You could either do the blanket stitch around there, you could do a some kind of a zigzag with a monofilament, or any way you want to stitch it, but I am going to stitch it so that this looks like it's an inset circle. And I'm going to do that by gently releasing what little bit of glue may have seeped through the fabric all the way around the edges to loosen that. I can easily see my pencil line that I drew, that I made my clips up to, and now it's time to go to the machine and sew this. This is so stinking cool. You're going to love it. I'll meet you at the machine. Okay, with everything glued in place, we're ready to attach the background fabric to the star. I'm simply going to fold back the background fabric. I'll put my needle in the crease that we made with the starch. I'm going to set my needle to stop in the down position when I stop stitching, so I can use my presser foot, my knee lifter, to lift my presser foot when I need to rotate. I'm just stitching along in the crease that was made with the starch. all the way around the circle. I just need to turn it to the back and cut away all of these excess seam allowances. Press it well from the front. Trim it to exactly 5.5 inches square. And I'm finished with 9 of these blocks for this month, and I'm ready for next month. I look forward to seeing yours on the show and tell, and in the meantime, it's a new day every day.